Hi, I'm Misso.
Hi, I'm G,
And we're the Watching Dead.
So, here we are. We've been watching season 3 for a little while now. And we've had the chance to see two very, very different approaches to leadership.
Yes.
And it's funny because they do have some parallels in that they're triumvirates. It's not obvious at first, but once you step back and you look at it, you can see that Woodbury and the prison are each run by a council of 3, basically.
Right.
Even though there is the one lead man.
And
They're
gotcha.
both run by triumvirates. And it's really, really interesting that.
Go ahead.
I could go on forever and ever and ever about the stability of triumvirate structures.
Yes.
For governance, and yeah, but I'm not.
Okay.
I mean, hey, I do have my history degree.
Yeah.
But in Woodbury, the triumvirate is the governor, Merle, and Milton. And in the prison, the triumvirate is Rick, Daryl, and Herschel.
Yep.
That's some cool stuff. So
I dig it.
yeah. So, what are your thoughts?
It's kind of like, even when we were talking about what we were going to talk about, we had very specific things to say about the 3 branches of the Woodbury Triumvirate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But when we talked about the prison, it's just like the Triumvirate.
Yeah.
And that's because those 3 at the prison are all, they're all just kind of even, you know, they're all the same. I mean, not the same, but you get what I'm saying.
They're in sync with each other.
Right.
And if you were to draw a Venn diagram of the 3 of them, there's definite overlap.
Yeah.
Whereas with Woodbury, if you draw a Venn diagram of them, it's like there's absolutely no overlap.
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's get to Woodbury, because we know a lot about the 3 with the prison.
Right.
So let's do a little bit on Woodbury.
All right.
Okay, Woodbury is run obviously by the front man, the governor.
Right.
And his biggest asset is his charisma. Now, he's a smart motherfucker.
Right.
Do not get me wrong. The governor is brilliant. But it's not his intelligence that lets him lead. It's not his smarts that let him lead. It's his charisma. It's his ability to find and get people working together. And that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
Charisma is not bad. However, people who are that high a level and, you know, who are that charismatic can sometimes be a bit unstable. And I don't know if the one causes the other or the one follows the other, but it can happen. And we see there are real world examples, because we have some charismatic people that, you know, you wouldn't want to be around. We had Jim Jones, Jonestown.
Yep.
Charles Manson. Yeah, I wasn't good either.
I don't remember around either of those.
Yeah. Then, you know, serial killers can often be very charismatic because they're good at convincing people.
Yeah.
And they're psychopaths and sociopaths. They lack empathy. And the governor, he lacks empathy for most people. I think the only person he feels it for is Penny. And that's his zombie daughter. But he's the one who runs Woodbury. And he runs it strictly because of his ability to charm, to persuade. And he's crazy.
That too.
And to him, he has to be the leader. And he has to be seen as the leader, as the one in charge. Anything that calls into question his position of top dog
Right.
must be destroyed.
Yeah.
And there's no chance for negotiation. There's no chance for, cooperative deals. In his mind, anything that makes him look less than at the apex of the pyramid
Right.
is unacceptable and cannot exist. And that's why he goes out and he kills the National Guard instead of, maybe trying to recruit them in, because they could have been a valuable asset.
Yeah.
That's why he wants to have the people in the prison killed, and he wants that whole thing destroyed.
Right.
Because it calls into question his ability.
Yeah.
And God knows it's not rational, and it's not sane, but this is the kind of thinking of, I don't know if it's psychopathic or sociopathic, but that's the kind of thinking that goes on in that type of mental abnormality.
Wow.
And then to support him in his rule and to keep him in head honchoville, basically,
Right.
he needs muscle,
Yep.
which is exemplified by Merle. And Merle is not an idiot. Uneducated, bit backwards, uncouth, definitely, but not stupid.
No.
He's impulsive, and he doesn't plan ahead a lot. He kind of just goes with the flow.
Yeah.
But he's not dumb, and he's able to get the defenses and then the kind of the army in Woodbury. He organizes them, he runs them, and he kind of calls the shots there.
Yeah.
And the governor's content to let him do that because the governor does not want to be seen as a muscle man. But muscle alone isn't enough.
Nope.
He needs the mind. And that's where Milton comes in.
Right.
Because Milton can figure out how to kind of rebuild some of the creature comforts they were used to, electricity, how to get power back. He's studying the walkers.
Yes.
And he's finding out, what attracts them, what draws them, and maybe what can repel them. Can it be cured? Can it be treated? Milton is great with the theoretical, and he takes everything with a very kind of scientific approach. He's sometimes a little bit too much into the theoretical, and then when reality asserts itself, it rattles him, as we see with Mr. Coleman. But he's unquestionably brilliant, and he's easy to manipulate. That's the triumvirate that holds Woodbury together, and without any one of them, it would fall apart.
Right.
But the governor is the key to it. You take the governor out, and Woodbury collapses completely. If you take Merle out, there is backup muscle with Martinez, with some of the others.
Right.
They're not as good as Merle, but they can do. If you take Milton out, you lose some of the power, you lose some of the creature comforts, and it's a lot harder to find somebody to replace Milton.
Right.
Because that kind of intelligence just is statistically rare. But you could do without either one of them for a time. But if you take the governor out, it collapses. And we see that play out later in season 3. And whereas with the prison,
Yes.
the prison is completely different. And would you like to talk about that?
I will. I'll talk about it for a little bit.
Okay.
Well, we have Rick, Daryl, and Herschel. And there are a few ways that we see, like, as opposed to if you take one of the Woodbury people away, that's it.
Yeah.
Several times over the course of the first part of the season, do we see one of them is taken away, or you know, even like when Rick goes to Crazy Town, you know,
Yeah.
Daryl is just like, okay, you know, Herschel is there too, and Daryl is just, we have to do this, 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 and this, and you know, they kind of keep everybody together while Rick is doing his thing, right? But then, you know, you see when Herschel gets taken out, you know, with his leg, they all kind of, it's just more stable.
Yeah.
Everybody knows where to sort of pick up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah, Rick is the leader.
Yeah.
But it's not so much like that. It's like that.
Yeah.
You know, and there are certain times where Herschel has to step, like Herschel even calls Rick out. You need to stop and come here and handle this business. You know what I'm saying? Like, they all just kind of work together. It's just even.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, it's because, as I said, they're kind of all on the same wavelength, and there's a lot of overlap between the three.
Right.
You know, there are divergences. You know, Rick is a good leader. He's kind of a good commander. He's the one who's kind of got his eye on the end goal at all times. And he knows what he wants for the group. And everything he does is working towards that end goal. He doesn't get distracted. He doesn't, you know, there's nothing that can sway him off this path. And that's a good trait in a leader, to some extent. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He's willing to get down and work in the dirt, as we see when he goes into Farmer Rick mode.
Oh, yeah.
He's also not afraid to, you know, carry out his own kind of muscle when he needs to. He will stand up and fight.
Right.
And he's willing to do the dirty work. He doesn't need to be seen as Mr. Clean, the way the governor does. Now, Daryl is also a very focused individual, but he doesn't have the same depth of focus that Rick has.
Yeah.
Daryl can get distracted, and he does. He gets distracted when he finds out that Merle is still around.
Oh, yeah.
He
That's
goes,
like one of the most epic scenes in the whole entire show.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's my brother.
Yeah.
Okay.
He can be distracted. And we see later on he gets distracted when Beth gets kidnapped. And he'll change his focus. His focus will shift from the end goal to the individual, whereas Rick is all about that end goal. Daryl is incredibly intelligent. He's got the street smarts. He knows a lot of things that are very valuable and very useful. He's also not afraid to get his hands dirty.
Right.
But Daryl doesn't care at all about the external appearance.
No.
To him, what is on the outside merely functions to protect what is on the inside.
Right.
And he doesn't really care if what is on the outside is pretty or not. Whereas Rick kind of wants what's on the outside to be pretty, because he knows that level of, that even though it's superficial, even though it's a facade, it's psychologically necessary. I don't think they get down into this analysis, not per se, but it's kind of an awareness, whereas that awareness is non-existent in Daryl. To him, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And Daryl makes a really great strong man, as we saw with Randall. You know, he will get down there and he will knock the shit out of somebody.
Yeah.
He's also not afraid to step up and do the dirty work, do hard work when necessary, because we saw that with Dale. We also see that in going into the battle, here in episode 8.
Yes.
Yeah, he's completely willing. There's no question about it. And to him, he wants to keep everybody alive.
Yeah.
That's kind of his end goal, is I want to keep these people who I've come to care about alive. And anything that interferes with that, I don't like.
Right.
Then the third leg of the triumvirate is Herschel. Herschel and Daryl actually have very similar backgrounds. They grew up under abusive fathers. They were both kind of cast out. You know, they have not had easy lives. But Herschel went a different direction. And just because of the generational gap. And two, just because individuals are always different. The micro is always different and unpredictable, whereas the macro can be easily predicted.
Right.
Herschel does focus a little bit more on the external than anyone else. But he doesn't ignore the internal. He knows that you have to have a solid foundation to build a house. But when you're building a house, you of course want it to look nice and you want it to be inviting. Herschel, out of the three, Herschel is the least future focused.
Yeah.
Herschel is very immediate focused. He's very present oriented. Rick is very future oriented, and Daryl is like midway between. Herschel gets distracted the most easily out of the three.
Right.
And Herschel also focuses more on the individuals within the group than the thought of the group as a whole. But they overlap so well and they mesh together so well that their triumvirate is stable. So if one part is missing, the leadership doesn't collapse. Rick can go off to Crazy Town because Daryl will step up and fill Rick's role as kind of executive. And he can do that. Daryl can go off with his brother, and Rick will then just say, okay, now I've got to be kind of the executioner and the muscle more, because Herschel obviously can't do it for physical reasons.
Yeah.
Herschel can go missing, and while Rick and Daryl can't provide the spiritual support that Herschel does, they can't provide kind of the morale and that certain je ne sais quoi that Herschel gives to the group. They can identify the people inside the group who can step up to do that, such as Beth. Beth is kind of Herschel's spiritual heir. Carol, earlier in the series, because as the series goes on, she goes into a progressively darker and darker mindset. Daryl and eventually kind of becomes the successor in that as well. And I'm still waiting to see if anybody from the Alexandria crew can step up to it. But the two triumvirates, very different, even though their goals and kind of their roles are very similar. They're very different, and the stability on them is very different.
Very different.
Rick doesn't need a big, huge group to feel successful.
Right.
The governor needs, the hundreds, the dozens, before he feels like I'm leading something that is worthy of me.
And he's all about the polish and the presentation. And Rick
is more focused on will it work.
Yes.
But it's cool. And it's nice to see that our old Roman structures have carried over.
That's true.
Yeah, because here we have the Triumvirate, and we have Rick and the governor filling the role of first consul.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty fucking epic, actually. But that about wraps it up. So, for now, I'm G.
And I'm Misso.
And we're the Watching Dead.